You begin by answering every message, accepting every invitation, and making yourself emotionally available whenever someone reaches out. It feels kind, responsible, even loving. Yet over time, something quietly changes. Your presence becomes expected instead of appreciated, and the warmth you offer starts to disappear into familiarity. Perhaps you have noticed that the moments you protect your time, delay a reply, or choose silence over immediate reassurance, people suddenly become more attentive. They ask where you have been. They value your words differently. At first, this feels confusing, even uncomfortable, because you were taught that being constantly available proves your loyalty and affection. The truth is more complicated. Human psychology has never measured value only by generosity or frequency. Our minds are deeply influenced by patterns, expectations, emotional uncertainty, and perceived scarcity. Somewhere between attachment and attention lies a hidden force that shapes how people experience your presence. Being less available is not about playing games or pretending not to care. It is about understanding the invisible psychological mechanisms that determine why constant access often weakens appreciation, while healthy absence can quietly strengthen connection. In this video, we will uncover why this happens, what it reveals about the human mind, and how becoming less available may actually help you become more emotionally present where it truly matters. Many people believe they became constantly available because they were naturally caring. Sometimes that is true, but beneath that kindness often lives a quieter story, one written long before adulthood. As children, many of us learned that attention, approval, or safety arrived only when we responded to the emotional needs of others. Love felt connected to usefulness, not simply to existence. The brain remembers these lessons with remarkable efficiency. Through repeated emotional experiences, neural pathways become stronger, teaching us that quick responses reduce uncertainty and protect important relationships. Over time, availability stops being a conscious choice. It becomes an automatic survival strategy, carried into friendships, families, romantic relationships, and even the workplace. Neuroscience suggests that our brains constantly search for social security, because belonging has always been tied to survival. When someone important seems distant or disappointed, regions involved in emotional pain become active, encouraging us to restore connection as quickly as possible. Replying immediately, saying yes, and always showing up can temporarily quiet that internal alarm. Imagine a child who notices that every smile from a parent follows good behavior or emotional caretaking. That child slowly learns that being needed feels safer than simply being loved. Years later, the same pattern appears in subtle ways. An adult answers messages during dinner, interrupts personal rest to solve someone else's problems, or feels guilty for taking a single day without responding. At first, this behavior earns appreciation. Friends describe the person as dependable. Partners call them supportive. Colleagues admire their reliability. Yet another process quietly unfolds beneath the surface. As predictable availability becomes the norm, the emotional impact of their presence slowly begins to fade. What was once treasured gradually becomes expected. Psychologists often describe this tendency through adaptation. The human mind quickly adjusts to consistent experiences, reducing the emotional response over time. What remains constantly accessible demands less conscious attention because the brain no longer treats it as something that could be lost. Familiarity creates comfort, but it can also quietly erase appreciation. This does not mean people intentionally stop caring. Most never notice the shift. They simply adapt to a pattern that feels permanent. The same brain that seeks stability also conserves energy by paying less attention to what seems guaranteed. Ironically, the more available you become, the less psychologically noticeable your presence can feel. Understanding this is not an invitation to become cold or distant. It is an invitation to recognize that healthy boundaries are not acts of rejection. They interrupt unconscious patterns that teach both you and others that your time, energy, and attention have value. Before long, Those boundaries begin revealing something even deeper about human behavior. Patterns that quietly shape every relationship without most people ever noticing. People rarely recognize these patterns while they are happening. They simply feel the emotional effects without seeing the invisible psychology beneath them. Once you begin noticing them, ordinary interactions suddenly reveal a completely different story. One of the first signs is that you instinctively make yourself available before anyone even asks. A friend casually mentions needing help, and before they finish speaking, you have already rearranged your schedule. At work, you volunteer for another task despite feeling exhausted. In relationships, you answer every call, believing love is measured by immediate access. Psychologically, this behavior is often driven by a desire to reduce uncertainty. The brain experiences approval as rewarding, releasing chemicals that reinforce helpful behavior. Each grateful smile or thankful message strengthens the habit, making constant availability feel emotionally necessary instead of consciously chosen. The hidden consequence is subtle. Because people rarely experience your absence, they stop recognizing the quiet sacrifices behind your presence. What once felt generous slowly becomes the expected rhythm of the relationship. Appreciation fades, not because they value you less, but because the human mind naturally adapts to consistency. This leads naturally to another sign. You begin feeling strangely anxious whenever you are unavailable. Even while resting, your thoughts drift toward unanswered messages. A simple notification becomes difficult to ignore. Instead of enjoying the present moment, part of your attention remains trapped somewhere else, waiting to reassure someone. Neuroscientists have found that anticipation itself activates powerful motivational systems within the brain. Every notification carries the possibility of emotional reward or emotional discomfort. Over time, checking your phone becomes less about communication and more about calming an invisible tension that quietly controls your behavior. Eventually, another pattern emerges. You notice that some people seem most interested in you only after you become busy with your own life. They suddenly initiate conversations, ask how you have been, or seem unusually attentive after periods of silence. At first, this feels confusing, even contradictory. This reaction reflects a deeply human tendency. We instinctively pay greater attention to what becomes less predictable. When something is no longer constantly available, the brain assigns it greater psychological importance because uncertainty naturally captures attention. Scarcity does not create value by itself, but it often reminds people of value they had stopped noticing. Yet this principle can easily be misunderstood. Becoming less available is not about ignoring people to manipulate their emotions. Genuine connection cannot survive calculated distance. Instead, healthy availability creates space where both people freely choose the relationship, rather than depending on automatic habits that quietly replace appreciation with expectation. As these patterns deepen, another emotional shift begins to appear. You may discover that the hardest person to disappoint is no longer everyone else. It is yourself. Beneath every immediate reply and every sacrificed evening lives a quieter fear. The fear that if you stop giving so much, your worth might somehow disappear. And that is where the deepest psychological conflict begins. There comes a point when constant availability no longer feels generous. It feels heavy. You wake up already thinking about who might need something from you. Your phone becomes less of a tool and more of an emotional leash, pulling your attention in countless directions before your own day has even begun. The exhaustion is rarely physical at first. It begins in the mind. Every delayed response creates imagined scenarios. Did they think you were ignoring them? Have they become upset? Should you explain yourself? Your brain starts predicting emotional outcomes before they even exist, trying to prevent conflicts that may never happen. Psychologists call this anticipatory thinking, a habit where the mind attempts to reduce uncertainty by mentally rehearsing every possible future. While this process can protect us from genuine danger, it becomes exhausting when applied to ordinary relationships. The mind mistakes emotional unpredictability for a threat that must always be controlled. Slowly, your attention becomes divided. Even during joyful moments with family or friends, a part of your mind remains elsewhere, wondering who is waiting for a reply. You are physically present, yet psychologically absent, trapped between the life you are living and the expectations you imagine others have of you. The irony is heartbreaking. In trying to be available for everyone, you become unavailable to yourself. The hobbies that once brought peace disappear. Quiet evenings feel uncomfortable. Solitude begins to resemble loneliness instead of restoration, because your identity has become tied to being needed rather than simply being. Over time, this creates emotional detachment. You continue showing up, smiling, helping, and listening, yet something inside feels strangely empty. Your kindness starts operating on habit instead of genuine desire. What once flowed naturally now feels like an obligation carried by invisible guilt. Philosopher Viktor Frankl observed that freedom is found not in controlling every circumstance, but in choosing our response to it. That wisdom reaches into modern psychology as well. The more we believe we must manage everyone's emotions, the less freedom we experience within our own minds. Control becomes a prison disguised as responsibility. Perhaps the deepest loneliness is not being surrounded by too few people. It is being surrounded by expectations while feeling unseen beneath them. Others recognize your usefulness, your reliability, your consistency, but they may never notice the quiet fatigue hidden behind your constant availability because you have become so skilled at concealing it. Yet awareness changes everything. The moment you recognize that your worth has never depended on uninterrupted access, the walls of that invisible prison begin to crack. What once felt like selfishness starts revealing itself as something entirely different. A doorway toward healthier relationships, deeper peace, and a version of yourself that no longer needs to earn the right to rest. Healing rarely begins with becoming more distant. It begins with becoming more intentional. There is a profound difference between withdrawing from people because you are wounded and protecting your energy because you finally understand its value. One is driven by fear, the other is guided by wisdom. Healthy boundaries are not walls built to keep others out. They are quiet reminders that your attention is one of your most valuable emotional resources. Every time you choose where that attention belongs, you teach both yourself and others that your presence is meaningful, not unlimited. At first, setting those boundaries may feel uncomfortable. You might reply later than usual, decline an invitation, or spend an evening without explaining your absence. The guilt can feel surprisingly intense because your brain is resisting a pattern it has repeated for years. Discomfort does not always mean you are doing something wrong. Sometimes it means you are growing beyond an old survival strategy. With time, something remarkable begins to happen. The anxiety that once followed every unanswered message starts to lose its grip. You realize that most relationships do not collapse because of a delayed reply. The disasters your mind predicted rarely arrive. Your nervous system slowly learns that peace is also a form of safety. This change also transforms the way others experience you. Instead of being constantly accessible, your presence becomes intentional. Conversations carry more attention because you are no longer emotionally scattered. Your words feel more sincere because they come from choice rather than obligation. Ironically, by giving less of yourself all the time, you are able to give more of yourself in the moments that truly matter. Psychology reminds us that secure relationships are not built through constant proximity. They are built through consistency, trust, and mutual respect. Two emotionally healthy people do not need uninterrupted access to prove they care. They remain connected even when life naturally creates distance, because their bond rests on confidence rather than constant reassurance. Perhaps the greatest realization is this: your value has never increased because you answered every message within seconds, nor has it decreased because you needed time for yourself. Your worth was never hidden inside your availability. It was always present in your character, your compassion, and your willingness to be authentic instead of endlessly accessible. When you finally stop measuring love by how available you are, you create room for something far more beautiful. You begin choosing relationships where your absence is respected, your presence is appreciated, and your boundaries are understood. That is not emotional distance. It is emotional maturity. The ocean never apologizes for its tides. It comes close, then quietly retreats, only to return again with the same quiet strength. Perhaps human connection was never meant to be different. Presence becomes meaningful because it is chosen, not because it is constant. If you have spent years believing that being endlessly available was the price of being loved, remember this. The people who truly value you are not searching for unlimited access to your time. They are grateful for the moments you genuinely share, because those moments come from a full heart rather than an exhausted one. Being less available is not the art of making people miss you. It is the courage to stop abandoning yourself in order to keep everyone else comfortable. It is the quiet decision to protect your peace without closing your heart, and to understand that boundaries are not the opposite of love, they are one of its healthiest expressions. As Carl Jung once suggested, becoming whole is not about pleasing the world around you. It is about becoming the person you were always meant to be, beneath the expectations that shaped you. Sometimes that journey begins with something as simple as allowing yourself the freedom to be unavailable without feeling guilty. So if today's reflection resonated with something you've quietly carried for years, let us know in the comments. Your story may become the reassurance someone else has been searching for. If you found meaning in this exploration, consider liking the video, sharing it with someone who gives too much of themselves, and subscribing for more journeys into the hidden psychology that shapes our lives. Until next time, protect your peace with quiet confidence, value your presence without measuring it by constant availability, and remember that the strongest connections are not those that demand every moment of your time, but those that continue to grow even in the gentle spaces between your absence and your return.